Watching the stream. On today's episode, what happens when a president reaches the end of his term but no election has been called? That is a question that the politicians in Somalia right now are wrestling with. Take a look behind me. This is President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmaajo. His term in office ended officially in February, but yet no election date has been set. What does that cause in terms of an impact in Somalia regarding politics and also the people? You are invited to be part of this discussion. You can do so by jumping into the comment section on YouTube, and you too can be in the stream. Joining us to talk about elections in Somalia, or the lack of elections in Somalia, we have Mohamed, we have Hodan, we have Samira. Good to see you. Mohamed, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hi everybody there. I'm Mohamed Hassan Idris. I'm Member of Parliament, Federal Parliament of Somalia, House of the People, elected from Jubaland constituency, Jubaland State. Jubaland State is among the 5 federal member states that contain Somalia's federal government. So my job is representing the people of Somalia.
Thank you for doing that on our show today. Appreciate you. Hodan, nice to see you. Introduce yourself to our global audience.
Thank you, Femi, and thank you for having me on the show. My name is Hodan Ali. I'm a medical and humanitarian expert and also co-founder of Lead Now, a women's movement in Somalia to ensure women's political participation is ensured in this election process.
Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the stream, Samira. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hey, I'm Samira Guide. I'm a national security practitioner in the Horn of Africa. Since 2012, I've worked in different capacities in Somalia. I'm the immediate former principal security advisor to the Prime Minister who just left, Hassan Ali Khaire, and I've been a special advisor to 3 heads of AMISOM. So I'm currently in DC at the moment pursuing international fellowship with the National Defense University.
Samira, how is it possible that an election date has not only not been set, but the election has not been held in Somalia? What's been happening?
I think we're all equally dumbfounded. I mean, we've always known that Somalis have this brinkmanship and they act in this manner sometimes. And we always know that when they come around the table, they will agree. But this is the first time that you find a mandate has expired and there's no agreement on the table, which is really, really strange. And it's really mystified the Somali people. We are all expecting that, the leaders will come together, come around the table. But what's been most difficult is just even coming together. They've met just a few times. They've not met as the number of times they should have, considering the matters that are at stake. I know the leaders are all in Mogadishu now for some big conference, but let's see how that goes. There's no agreement on an agenda, so they can't even open the meeting.
Oh my goodness, confusion everywhere. I'm going to show a little timeline, everybody, so we can see what happened in February as we were creeping closer and closer and closer to the end of the president's mandate. So let's start on February the 6th. Talks between the government and state leaders on how to administer elections. Well, those talks, they broke down. February the 8th, President Mohamed's term expired, with opposition leaders saying they would no longer recognise his presidency. Then on February the 19th, opposition protesters came under attack from government forces while marching in Mogadishu. And this happened hours after overnight fighting between government forces and armed opposition guards. So now we're almost a month later. Mohamed, though, you have news for us about the opposition organising. And you sent us a couple of pictures. So perhaps you can tell us what's happening in these pictures right here. This was just hours before you came on air with us. What is happening here?
So there was expected several times and a temptation that leaders come together and try to agree, since the president's mandate in the office was ended in February 8th, as you just said, and a lot of people know that. So it never happened in the political landscape in Somalia since 2000 from Atta's political process. It's always there's an agreement after an election. 4 years there was an agreement. Now the terms of the president ended without agreement, and there was tried that several times in several places Last time was Somalia. It is the capital city of Galmudug state that ended up without any agreement.
Mohamed, but I don't understand. What's the problem?
The problem is that I think the federal government, the president whose term ended, was trying to make things very tough. That because he wanted to do a process that one-side process, and the people wanted transparent process. So it makes things very difficult to come together. Now, today, after 11 days, the president of Jubaland and the president of Puntland stayed in, make them to stay in Halane and at the airport, waiting them from the president.
Let me just go back, because that picture, I wondered what the airport sign was at the back. So there was a meeting at the airport earlier on today. And how did that meeting go?
That meeting actually ended up informing and establishing a National Salvation Council, which actually makes together and groups them, the two federal member state leaders, the opposition leaders, and the Speaker of the Parliament,
right,
the upper house Speaker. So it's been formed that group today. It's called National Salvation Council, that they decided after the president and his team actually rejected every attempt that people were trying to make. So
Mohamed, just help me out here, make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So this meeting was to organise opposition to the president. Hodan, help me out here.
No.
Am I understanding this correctly? Is this the opposition organising? No. Hodan, Hodan's nodding, but I can't hear a nod. Hodan, articulate your nod. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely, you're correct. Today's meeting was really a collection of the opposition team coming together and collectively voicing their concerns and demanding a different way forward must be charted. It consists of the presidential candidates coming together, the Council of Presidential Candidates, the President of Jubaland and the President of Puntland, and the members of leading Somaliland constituents. So really, officially, they've gathered today to sort of coalesce their voice, whereas before, this platform was not created. But it really speaks to the level of crisis, political crisis that we're in. We've not been in this situation before, as Samira and both MP Mohamed have mentioned, right? And the fact that, and even where the meeting was being held is quite significant, inside the airport, which is within the green zone under the UN mandate. And that stems to the lack of trust between the federal member states and the opposition groups, and also and the federal government. Just a quick, I know Somali politics is not very easy to digest, but sort of give you a Coles note. Somalia is a federal state. It has 5 member states in the federal government. 2 of the states, Jubaland and Puntland, have been sort of in disagreements throughout the last 3 years for the better half of the current administration's tenure, coupled with now the Somaliland coalition with the presidential aspirants of this year's election coming together now to sort of form one voice to kind of show their dissent, but also to send messages across the board, that things must change and that the government must hold fair elections, right, and timed elections. I think we've passed the time, but it's never too late.
Samir, I want to play 2 voices to you. One is the president's voice, and the other voice is the voice of opposition. This is from early February, and you can hear the political differences. The president is saying one thing, the opposition is saying another thing, and I would love you to be able to interpret it for us. Let's have a listen.
I'm telling you that there is foreign interference in the national election process, in Somalia in general.
The president himself is the main impasse to the elections. It is not under any question. It is clear. The president of the federal government is responsible for all problems because he wants to rig the election.
Samira.
Yes, I think that's indicative of the polarization currently in Somalia. And I think Hodan mentioned something very interesting. She said that the lack of trust between the stakeholders. And I think that's the biggest thing that is missing from this electoral process that was present in previous electoral processes. I mean, we've always had challenges with governance and disagreement over electoral processes. But over the past 8 years, our political leaders have managed to come together and agree when it's time to agree and have the interests of the Somali people at heart. But what you have is two sides that are so far apart and speaking such different languages. If you were to speak to those in Villa Somalia right now, they would tell you the president has conceded so many times. He was for one person, one vote. He let go of that. He was for 300 electors, delegates per MP. That they are now 101. I mean, they list the number of times he's conceded. And on the other side, when you speak to the opposition, they say that wasn't really concession. One person, one vote was never really possible in the first place. So, I mean, we're so far apart, and there has to be a third party that comes in between. That's my belief. And unfortunately, there's simply no trust right now in the president, whose term expired on 8th of February. There's been no agreement on the implementation of the September 17th agreement. And to top it off, there's no urgency for stakeholders to come together and agree. The lack of urgency is, I think, the most disturbing thing. 8th February came and went, and there's no discussion. On the opposition's part, they say, his mandate expired, the constitution is clear, no legislation supersedes constitution. On the president's part, he speaks of an agreement that was signed by the parliamentarians and the Speaker of the Upper House that legitimizes his stay and any other leader's stay until a new government comes into play. But the ultimate thing is Somalia is waiting. We're all holding our breath, waiting for this process to end. We have COVID to deal with. We have the insurgency of al-Shabab that is still, racking our country. So there's so much more to do than just politics, and we just wish they would get on with it.
I want to share with you guests some of the YouTube conversation that you are generating, because it is divided. And I want you to instantly react, Mohamed, to some of this reaction, and Hoda, and Hodan, and also Samira. Absha Omar, we don't need dictatorship. Al-Ahmed, Farmaajo time is up as a president. Mohamed, quickly, briefly, respond.
Indeed, my sisters have actually mentioned the real problem that needed to be actually identified is the trust. And trust has never been given. Trust is earned. And the president, he lost actually every legitimate that people could trust. And he, with the action that he even taken an action that he's attacked a former president in a daylight. So it's very difficult. And same as what the message just have said. So dictators in Somalia absolutely have no place, and we do not accept dictators. The process was going on. It was actually gradually changing. We need that process to continue in order to stand Somalia its feet. And to stand its feet only can come a consensus and going together, agreed one.
Okay, Mohamed, I'm going to move on. Differences of opinion here. Hold on, I'm going to give you these two. Farmaajo is and will be our president. All others are traitors. And one more here. We are behind Farmaajo 100%. That's from Nomadic Impression. You can hear the debate going on in the YouTube comments right there. Is that what's happening in Somalia down on the ground?
Absolutely. And that's, the polarization that Samira has referenced, right? Like one side, it's we don't want dictator. And the other side is we're behind the president and that other rhetoric that you just read. And I think it really speaks to the threat of a serious impasse that could lead Somalia in the wrong direction. We have, a population that's becoming more polarized every day, and ultimately we don't have an agreed political consensus. I mean, the fact that the president's term has ended, it's nothing new in Somalia. It has happened before, but what has always happened is the leadership, the stakeholders have been able to find common ground to work together.
Yeah. Is the president still president even though his term has expired?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Is the president still president if his term has expired? Can you hear me? Let me move to Samira. Samira, is the president still president right now, even though his term has expired?
I know this brings up a lot of debate, but in my opinion, I don't think so. After 8th of February, things have changed, and there has to be a political agreement that legitimizes his stay, and that's what is missing, is them coming around the table, formalizing this extended stay, because we are nothing without constitutionality. We have to be bound by the rule of law, and the constitution is clear. It's 4-year term, and the 4-year term ended, but the fact that we continue on, I think is really disturbing. And then I think no one else has mentioned the violence of 19th of February really stoked the tensions and the calls about dictatorship. And that's really what's got everyone up in arms. And then for the first time in a decade, you'll see that there's a general feeling of regression when it comes to the state building project. First time people are talking about dictatorship, a return to civil war, state of collapse. I've been in Somalia from 2012, and there's always electoral processes were emotive, but people were excited, and they were always excited for change. But now you see, dictatorship being talked about, a militarized election. We saw the tanks coming out, and we don't have very many of them. So the tanks coming out for the demonstrations recently. So I think I'm with the population. We are dejected and we're fatigued. We have too many problems, and we just like this to come to a close soon.
Samira Mohamed mentioned some of those problems. Al-Shabab, still seeing those attacks. There's some food insecurity issues. COVID-19 is always lurking wherever we are in the world. It's pretty much lurking in the background, exacerbating any issues that we currently have. From your constituents, from your people that you are representing, Mohamed, how are they coping with this instability regarding what will happen regarding the presidency and elections? Give us an example.
It really concerns everybody, and it concerns in our people, all of us. Specifically, when it comes to political crisis that gets greater danger to every single angle, including the al-Shabab getting that chance of increase themselves, influencing in the society, collecting tax in the cities, among them in Mogadishu at the port. That publicly that Shabab is collecting now tax. People are paying double tax. It's very dangerous, and it's getting into, as my sister said, it's going Somalia to the very wrong direction. And in all costs, if the international community, whom have paid Somalia a lot of investment, a lot of attention to make sure Somalia stands its feet, and peace and stability achieved in East Africa, in particular in Somalia, if they don't change the way they are facing now the president whose terms ended, because they are entertaining. Our concern is that they're entertaining a lot, because we understand that the diplomatic privilege that they have, the diplomatic leverage that they have, if they put pressure on that president, things will change. Otherwise, the concern is getting greater, and its danger is coming very, very, very big.
All right, so Hodan is back with us. That's great to have you back. I want to play this to you, Hodan. I'm really intrigued by your response. This is Professor Abdi Elmi talking about the main issue right now in getting to a solution, getting to an election date. Have a listen.
Mistrust is the main reason behind this lack of selection processes. And this is rooted in the way the government managed previous dispensations or previous elections, and also the way the federal member states behaved or acted in the past as though they are independent states. In terms of security, judiciary, and economic, obviously the Somalis are now so polarized to the extent that these institutions have been politicized. And finally, I think it will have overall legitimacy impact on the whole system.
Professor, basically echoing our conversation that we've been having for the last 20 minutes. How do we get out of that situation? If there's no trust, where does the trust come from?
I think Somalis need to look internally. At the moment, the process has been going in the wrong direction, and it's not good for the country for the various reasons that Samira and Mohamed have mentioned, from security to humanitarian crisis to medical crisis as COVID ravages the country. this issue around security is fundamental to be addressed. One of the things that came out of post February 18th and 19th incident in which protesters were fired at, and some of them being the political candidates for presidents and former presidents. I think that has changed the tone of the election in a way that we have not seen before. To get past that, what the opposition is asking for is for the security of elections be guaranteed. There's a precedence from the previous election in 2016 when the mandate of the former president Hassan Sheikh expired, that he gave a decree relinquishing his presidential powers, which then there is a national committee formed to manage the security process and the electoral process. So that would give the opposition in the federal member states a bit of confidence. This is what they're asking for. Of course, that's something that Villa Somalia is against in the president's camp. So ultimately, Somalis need to sit, and now we're looking towards the international community, who has thus far, as Mohamed mentioned, really, have not played the strong arm sort of role to sort of guide the process. They've been offhand, but at the moment we see that the impasse is a serious one. I know we've had discussions prior to February 8th, and everybody was like, well, what happens after February 8th? Well, this is what happens February 8th, and this country now is looking at serious setbacks. From a public that is extremely fragile in terms of just recovering from 20 some odd years of civil strife, and then also struggling with extremist element violence and with Shabab. So all in all, the trust must be regained, and that means that there needs to be a middle, some mediation that needs to happen to bring everyone back to the table. Because as we can see, one speaking Chinese and one speaking, Spanish, right? Like literally, they're on two different planets. And from that, we've seen from, numerous meetings have failed. Samareb 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're in Mogadishu, and the opposition are not really willing to even leave the protective area, and that is a huge message. And not only that, the public now is becoming extremely polarized, and Somalia cannot afford a public that goes back to the sentiments of violence and civil unrest. So, obviously there aren't any, magic solutions, but there needs to be some serious mediation that needs to be introduced, by whom I think we've yet to see. But the international community now, I think, gets the message that with today's announcement of this forum, the National Salvation Forum, the message is even louder. And that the president and Villa Somalia also see that message. What they do in the next days to come is everybody's guess. But at this point, I think we're all dumbfounded, as Samira said earlier. No one has expected to get to this point. And in the end, Somalis must find solution within themselves. But unfortunately, at this point in the game, I'm not sure that's possible.
Thank you so much, Hodan and Samira, and also Mohamed, because you took, as Hodan said, some really deep politics in Somalia and unpacked it for us in a really confounding situation, which is, why is there not an election date? Why is there not an election date yet? It's really interestingly, I'm just having a look at some of the YouTube comments here. Abdullahi says the constitution should be effective and we should reconsider if the federal system can be effective in this context. The state federal government and the government will always be stuck in such a scenario. And that comes from Mohamed Abdullahi. Is it the Mohamed Abdullahi? Is he watching the stream? Who knows? But thank you, YouTubers, for watching the stream. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your time, guests, as well. I'm Femi Oke, signing off. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.